Good evening, my friends. I want you to do something for me right now. Not when I've finished speaking, not after you've decided whether you agree with what I'm about to say. Right now, I want you to close your eyes for just a moment. Go ahead. Trust me and think of a time when something went terribly wrong. A door that slammed shut, a relationship that ended, a plan that collapsed, a dream that seemed to die. Hold it in your mind. Now, and this is the important part, I want you to think about what came after that loss. What opened because that closed. Who you became because that fell apart. Where you ended up because you couldn't stay where you were. Can you see it? For most of you, there is something there. A faint, quiet recognition that the thing you mourned, really mourned, convinced yourself was a catastrophe, was, in retrospect, among the most important things that ever happened to you. Open your eyes. What you just touched in those few seconds, that recognition, that retroactive trust, is the entire teaching for tonight. My question to you is simple. What if you could live there? Not in hindsight, but now in the middle of it, before the resolution arrives, before you can see how it works out. What if you could walk through your life with the settled, unshakable knowing, not hope, not optimism, not wishful thinking, but deep, structural knowing that everything, without exception, is working out for you? I am here to tell you tonight that this is not a fantasy. It is a law, and you have access to it. Right now, this instant. Let me begin by telling you what this teaching is not. It is not a motivational mantra. It is not positive thinking dressed in spiritual language. It is not the suggestion that you paste a smile over your pain and pretend everything is fine. I have no interest in any of those things, and I suspect neither do you, otherwise you wouldn't be here. This is metaphysics. This is the foundational architecture of how reality is actually constructed. At the level beneath appearances, beneath what your senses report to you, beneath the evidence your circumstances seem to present as immovable fact. The law is this. What you assume to be true hardens into fact. Not sometimes. Not under ideal conditions. Not when you perform the right technique or say the right words or have enough faith by someone else's measurement. Always. Your consciousness is always creating. Right now, in this moment, whatever you are most deeply assuming about yourself, about life, about what is possible for you, that assumption is the seed from which your experienced reality is growing. This means that the question is never whether you are creating. You are always creating. The question is only, what are you assuming? And for most people, good people, intelligent people, people who have read every book and attended every seminar, and genuinely, earnestly want to understand, the dominant assumption is a quiet, constant, almost unconscious whisper that says, I am not sure this will work out. Things tend to go wrong for me. I have to fight for everything I get. Life is uncertain, and uncertainty is dangerous. Not because they have chosen to believe this, but because their experiences have written it in, year by year, disappointment by disappointment, until it became the invisible water they swim in. And because that assumption is dominant, because it runs underneath everything, even during the visualization sessions and the affirmation practices and the moments of genuine faith, it is what manifests, not the desire, the assumption beneath the desire. Now I want to talk about appearances, because this is where most people fall. Not during the visualization, not during the practice, but when they walk out into their actual life and the circumstances are still what they were, when the bank account still shows what it shows, when the phone still doesn't ring with the news they're waiting for, when the body still feels what it feels. In those moments, and these moments will come, they always come, something rises up, something that says, but look at the evidence. How can you claim it's working out when this is what's here? And I want to address this directly because it is the central challenge of this entire teaching. Your senses are not liars, but they are slow. What you see around you right now is not your present assumption made visible. It is your past assumption made visible. It is the physical solidification of a state of consciousness you held weeks, months, sometimes years ago, now finally dense enough to be perceived with the physical senses. The circumstances you are looking at are old data. They are, quite literally, history. When you look at a star in the night sky, you are not seeing that star as it is now. You are seeing light that left it thousands of years ago, arriving at your eyes in this moment. The star itself may no longer even exist. What you're seeing is the record of something that was, not the reality of what is. Your circumstances work the same way. They are the light of old assumptions, reaching you now. And if you let what you see determine what you assume, if you look at the evidence of yesterday's consciousness and allow it to dictate today's inner state, you simply perpetuate the cycle. Yesterday's assumption becomes today's circumstances, become tomorrow's assumption, becomes next week's circumstances. The mirror keeps reflecting the same face because you keep making the same face. To break the cycle, you must be willing to assume something the evidence has not yet confirmed. Not in spite of intelligence, because of it. Because you understand, at a level that goes beyond wishful thinking, that the unseen precedes the seen, that the inner always precedes the outer. That if you want different circumstances, you must hold a different state and hold it before, not after, the circumstances change. This is what faith actually is. Not the feeling of certainty when everything is going well. Anyone can maintain their state when life is cooperating. Faith is maintaining your inner knowing precisely when the outer world is telling the opposite story. That is its power. That is why it moves mountains. Let me tell you about a man I knew who lived in chronic dread. Not dramatic dread, not the kind that paralyzes. Subtle dread, the low-grade hum of a person who is always waiting for the next thing to go wrong. Every small inconvenience confirmed his suspicion. Every delay was evidence of something worse approaching. Every coincidence that another person would have shrugged off, he read as an omen. And life, being the faithful mirror that it is, cooperated completely. His car broke down when it could least afford to. His health expressed his anxiety in increasingly specific physical symptoms. His relationships reflected back the distance he kept from the possibility of real joy. He was not unlucky, he was not cursed. He was, as I told him gently, simply faithful to the wrong assumption. He had become, over years of careful practice, extraordinarily good at assuming that things go wrong. He was a virtuoso of anticipatory dread. And the law, which has no opinion about what you assume, which simply and precisely delivers the physical equivalent of your dominant inner state, obliged him completely. I asked him to try something for 30 days, not to pretend life was perfect, not to suppress his concerns, but simply to add one new sentence to his inner conversation, and to mean it as genuinely as he could. Everything is always working out for me. Not as a hope, as a statement of law, as a recognition that if this principle is true, and he had enough intellectual openness to grant that it might be, then it must be true for him as well. Not eventually. Now, he practiced this, quietly, persistently, without fanfare. The first week, nothing visible changed. But he began to notice something internal shifting. The moments of dread came, but they had slightly less weight. When an inconvenience arrived, there was a new voice alongside the old one, small, uncertain, but present, saying, and yet, this too is part of it working out. By the third week, things began to move. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in the way that things move when you've genuinely shifted the assumption, quietly, from multiple directions simultaneously, in ways that feel less like forcing and more like flowing. An unexpected check arrived. A conversation he'd been dreading turned out to contain exactly the information he needed. His health began, without explanation, to improve. He came to me at the end of the month and said something I have never forgotten. I don't know if I changed my life or just finally started seeing it correctly. I told him, those are not different things. Let me take you deeper into the practice. Because I want to be specific. I want to give you something you can use today, this evening, in the actual texture of your actual life. Living as if everything works out for you is not a grand gesture. It is 1,000 small choices made throughout the day in the quiet moments no one else observes. It is what you say to yourself when the traffic is heavy and you're running late. Most people feel the familiar contraction. Of course, this would happen, and feed it. They add this moment to the mental file labeled evidence that things go wrong for me. They arrive at their destination already in a state of low-grade defeat before the day has properly begun. The practice looks like this instead. I may not see the whole picture yet, but I know this is part of it working out. Not as a performance, not through gritted teeth, but as a genuine, even curious orientation. What am I being redirected toward? What am I being protected from? What is this delay opening space for? This is not naivete. This is the trained recognition that every detour you have ever taken in your life, every one revealed its purpose eventually. You simply didn't have to wait to assign that purpose. You could have assumed it in the moment and lived inside the peace of that assumption rather than the anxiety of uncertainty. It is the recognition that you have never, not once, been left behind by life, that the closed doors were always followed, somewhere, by open ones, that what you called failure was always eventually set up. What if you could live from that now? That question, held genuinely, explored with real curiosity, is the doorway into the state I'm describing. There is a passage that has been written, taught, and quoted for thousands of years. According to your faith, be it unto you. Most people read this as inspiration, encouragement to believe more. But it is not encouragement, it is description. It is a precise, technical account of how reality forms. According to your faith, according to your assumption, your inner conviction, the state you actually inhabit, rather than the one you wish you inhabited, be it unto you. Not it might become, not you'll get it if you're worthy. Be it, present tense, already, now. The master wasn't offering hope, he was explaining the mechanism. And the instruction that accompanies it is equally precise. When you pray, believe that you have received, and you shall receive. Not believe that you will receive. Believe that you have received. The past tense is everything, because it collapses the gap between the assumption and the manifestation. It removes the waiting from the equation. It requires you to enter the state of already, already done, already given, already complete, and to remain there, not as a technique, but as an identity. This is not complicated theology. This is the plainest possible instruction for working with the law. Assume you have received. Live from that assumption. Watch the world catch up. I want to address the question of how, because I can already hear some of you asking, how do I do this? How do I genuinely feel that everything is working out when the evidence says otherwise? How do I make that assumption real enough that it actually shifts something? Here is the answer. You start with memory. I said earlier, think of a time when something went wrong and later revealed itself as essential. You did that. You found something. That recognition that, oh, it actually worked out, is not intellectual. It is felt. It has a specific quality, a specific warmth in the chest, a specific relaxation in the shoulders. That feeling is your starting point. Close your eyes and find it. Let yourself genuinely inhabit it for 30 seconds. Notice how your body changes when you're inside that recognition, how the quality of your breathing changes, how the tightness in your jaw releases slightly. Now, and this is the step, generalize it. Don't just apply it to the past memory. Let it expand to include right now. Let it include the uncertain situation you're currently in, the thing you're waiting to resolve, the outcome you can't yet see. Say to yourself, with that same felt quality, this too is working out for me. And notice whether you can find even a flicker, even the smallest ember of genuine recognition that this might be true. That flicker is the seed. Water it. Return to it throughout the day, not by forcing a feeling you don't have, but by genuinely asking, what if this is true? What would it feel like if I knew this was true? And letting the felt sense of that question, rather than the intellectual answer, carry you into the state. Over time, over days and weeks of this practice, the flicker becomes a flame, and the flame, given consistent air, becomes the steady warmth of an assumption that no longer needs to be actively maintained. It simply is, the way your name simply is, the way your face simply is, not performed, not reminded, not achieved. Known, you must understand something about the state I am describing. There is a particular quality to it that distinguishes it from positive thinking, from forced optimism, from the exhausting performance of faith. It is stillness. When you are genuinely inside the assumption that everything is working out for you, you do not feel euphoric. You do not feel triumphant. You do not feel the inflated, effortful feeling of someone who is trying very hard to believe something. You feel still. There is a quietness to it, a lack of grasping, a quality of someone who has set something down finally after carrying it too long. You are no longer managing your anxiety about the outcome. You are no longer rehearsing worst-case scenarios as a form of self-protection. You are no longer checking obsessively for signs, for evidence, for proof that it's working. You simply know it is. And from that knowing, you move through your day differently. Your voice is different, not louder, not more forceful, quieter, actually, more grounded. There is something in you that is not available for panic, because it is rooted somewhere panic cannot reach. People notice this. They cannot name it, but they feel it. There is a quality of presence in someone who genuinely lives from this assumption, a kind of settled authority that has nothing to do with achievement or performance or accomplishment. It is the authority of someone who knows that life is on their side, not because they have proof, because they have decided, and that decision held consistently, returned to faithfully, made again every morning, and every time it wavers, eventually stops being a decision at all. It becomes identity. You become the person for whom everything works out. And the world, which is always mirroring your identity back to you with perfect faithfulness, rearranges itself accordingly. Let me speak to the moment of difficulty, because there will be moments. I am not here to promise you a life without challenge. The teaching I carry has never promised that. But there will come a moment, perhaps you are already in one, where everything around you seems to be screaming the opposite of what I've described tonight, where the evidence is not subtle, where the loss is real, the pain is real, the fear is real and large, and refuses to be minimized. What do you do in that moment? You anchor yourself in the state, not by denying what you see, not by pretending the pain isn't real, but by refusing gently, firmly, faithfully to let what you see determine what you assume. You say to yourself, I may not understand this. I may not be able to see the shape of it yet. But I know, because I have seen it before in my own life, that the moments that looked like the worst were often the ones that carried the greatest gifts. And so I choose here, now, in this difficulty, to remain faithful to the assumption that this too is working out for me. This is not weakness. This is the hardest, most powerful thing a human being can do. To remain in the state when every sense and every circumstance is pulling against it. To hold the assumption when the evidence is screaming the opposite. This is the test the teaching speaks of, not a punishment, not an obstacle, but the moment when the depth of your assumption is revealed. When you discover whether what you have is a technique you perform or a truth you have actually embodied. And every time you pass that test, every time you hold the state in the face of contrary evidence, something deepens. Something becomes more permanent. The assumption sets, like concrete, into something that cannot be easily shaken. And after enough of these moments, enough faithful returns to the state, in spite of appearances, you will find yourself one quiet, ordinary morning, simply knowing it, without effort, without reminder. Everything is working out for me, not as a practice, as a fact. So let me ask you again the question I began with. Think of that time when something seemed catastrophic and revealed itself as essential. Now bring yourself back to the present moment, to whatever is unresolved, uncertain, frightening, or stuck in your life right now. And ask, what if this too? What if this too is working out? What if the delay is protection? What if the closed door is redirection? What if the empty space is being cleared for something you haven't yet imagined? You don't have to know the answer. You only have to be willing to inhabit the question. To let what if it's working out be the dominant frequency in your consciousness. Not occasionally, not during practice, but as the steady, quiet undertone of your entire lived experience. Start now, not tomorrow, not after the situation resolves. Now. Walk out of here tonight as someone who has decided, really decided, not tentatively hoped, that life is working in their favor, that every step is being guided, that nothing is wasted, that the universe does not make mistakes with you. Carry that assumption into tomorrow morning. And when doubt appears, and it will, do not fight it, simply return to the state. Oh, I drifted. Everything is working out for me. Back to the knowing, back to the stillness, back to the assumption. Every time you return, it becomes more natural. Every morning you wake into it, it becomes more real. Every moment you hold it in the face of difficulty, it becomes more permanent. Until one day it is simply who you are, the person for whom everything works out. And from that identity, from that assumption, held with quiet, unwavering faithfulness, everything must, because that is the law, not sometimes, always. You are not at the mercy of life. You are not a passenger. You are the assumption from which life takes its shape. And when you assume, truly assume, in your bones, in your silence, in the texture of your most private thoughts, that everything is always working out for you, you are not making a wish. You are stating a fact before the world has had time to confirm it. And the world, which has always been your faithful mirror, your obedient servant, your perfect echo, will catch up. It always does. It always has. It always will. Good evening, my friends. Walk out of here knowing. This is Neville Lectures. I'll see you again in the next video.